Here's the deal. Often we hear people complain about lights, guitars, fog machines, drums, all these things as a distraction from worship. But today on Practical Church Planting, we're going to talk about why that's not the case and going to give you 5 reasons why lights, guitars, and fog machines aren't the enemy in worship.
Well, welcome back to Practical Church Planting, where in 15 minutes or less, we'll give you practical tips, advice, and encouragement to help you plant and grow healthy churches. My name is Brian Nedrosian. Joining me is Dylan Dodson, and today we're talking about 5 reasons that lights, guitars, and fog machines are not the enemy of worship.
Ooh, that's a good title there, Brian.
It's a great title.
What are we talking about here? I recently heard, I'm going to completely butcher the quote, by a very well-known pastor who many of you have heard, probably. But we won't mention his name.
Who will go unnamed.
Because we disagree. Basically, there was a quote essentially saying this, that if you only had one light bulb and an acoustic guitar, would anybody show up to worship at your church? The dig was, we put so much emphasis into all these things, the lights, guitars, fog machines, that if you take all those away, nobody's going to come to your church. The point is that they're coming for those things and not to worship Jesus. And we should be ashamed. Now,
how dare we?
Here's why, 5 reasons why we would say those things are not the enemy, as is often articulated by people who say that they are.
Yeah.
And not to cause divisions, but we want to have a serious conversation here. Here's number one, the real reason that's driving all of this, is that when people say, we don't need all these things, we just need singing and a fluorescent light bulb. That's all we need. When you say that, what you are saying is that you want a church of only mature believers.
Right.
Because only mature believers can handle worshiping Jesus no matter the genre, not that preferences are wrong. There's nothing wrong with or bad. There's nothing wrong with them. But if you take away some of the things that help engage people, then you're going to be left with only the super mature believers. My question is, do you want a church of only mature believers?
Yeah.
But the answer to all of that is no, you do not want that.
Of course.
You're not fulfilling the Great Commission in any way if the only people that are going to show up are the people that want a guitar and a light bulb. Now, those things are great. I love those things. But it really frustrates me because we're missing the point is yes, we want to grow relationships, but it's also to reach people who don't know Jesus and to make it easy for them to connect and comfortable to connect. And so while it is easy to idolize guitars, fog machines, whatever.
Yeah.
And yes, that's not the ultimate thing. To say that they're bad just because you think they're too consumeristic, which we don't want to be consumeristic, but it's completely negating the fact that a lot of people need comfortable things that make them comfortable and things that they're used to seeing and hearing to help them engage, especially if they don't know Jesus or if they're new followers of Christ.
I think we do this in a lot, and even us, even though we're kind of arguing against the point, I think a lot of us do this kind of thing a lot in churches where we assume that everyone is us.
Right.
That we assume that everyone has the same level of spiritual maturity as me and things like that. We need to remember, not only do we have people who are spiritually immature, we have people who hopefully have never stepped foot in a church in their life.
Right.
So having things that are just make it a little more comfortable for them, I don't think is watering anything down or is, cheapening the product or making worship less genuine.
Right.
It's making it so that they're able to assimilate in and willing to, or more comfortable coming back and worshiping again.
Right. And again, the caveat is, yes, you could put too much in the performance.
Of course.
But that's not the point. The point here is that these things are good because we want to connect with people. And if we throw everything out and say, no, you just need a guitar, that's fine. But if you just want mature believers in your church, then do that.
Yeah.
If you don't, then be okay with us trying to use what people use in our modern culture today to reach them. That's kind of what Paul says, by all things to all people.
Yep.
Not that you can tell that this is a pet peeve of mine. So number one, you don't want a church of only mature believers, so it's okay to have things to help engage people. Number two, kind of with that, is that leading people into worship is a good thing. Like, a lot of times it's by pastors and people in ministry who get frustrated that everybody else can't just do what they do or want what they want. But you got to remember, even people that love Jesus, they have normal jobs, they have normal families, they're not thinking about church 24/7 like we are. They're distracted, they've got discouragements. It's okay to create environments that help lead them and help focus them in on what's important. And while you don't necessarily need other things to do it, if it can help, it's not inherently evil. I think what often happens is people kind of inherently say, well, it's less than because you need these things. When our job as ministry leaders is to lead people, and part of that is to help lead and focus them in on worshiping.
Yeah, we're not preaching to rooms. We've said this 1,000 times. We're not preaching to rooms full of preachers or
Right.
rooms full of seminary students.
Right.
Not to say that those people don't need this as well, but like you said, we're preaching to people who probably haven't thought about church since last week if they were there, or that is not the top of their mind. And so we're not talking to people who are thinking about this 24/7 like you may be.
Yep.
But these are people that come in with 1,000 things on their mind and need things to maybe be focused on one specific thing.
Right.
If they have all these things on their mind and then they're given a kind of environment that doesn't help them focus at all, then they're going to be, well, not focused.
Right.
I mean, they're going to be focused on all the other things they're thinking of and not focusing on the worship.
Right. And again, there's nothing wrong with having a lot of little things. It all goes back to motivation, making sure we're doing the best that we can with the right heart.
Yeah.
And that's the assumption with these things, but it's okay to use things to help lead and draw people in. Like that's a
Right.
good thing. Number 3, another reason why lights, guitars, and fog machines aren't the enemy, is because you need to use your conscience. And here's what I mean. Like, there are different churches that reach different people. And so for you, if a fog machine is something, and that, full disclosure, we don't use a fog machine in New City Church. I don't prefer a fog machine, but I'm not going to get mad if you have one.
Not yet.
Not yet. On one of these
Just
Sundays,
kidding.
Brian's going to pick one up. We need different churches to reach different people, like we just do. Like if all churches were the exact same, we would only be reaching the same type of people.
Yeah.
And so if it is against your conscience to have 20, 30, 40 years ago an electric guitar and drums, then don't have it. But to say that it's a sin is wrong. Like there's
Right.
nothing sinful about a fog machine. It can become sinful if your desire is just to create a cool show that you want to impress people.
Yeah.
But a fog machine in and of itself is not wrong, especially if it helps with the lights and helps create an effect that, depending on the space and what it looks like and all that sort of thing. But so use your conscience, but don't condemn people whose conscience is different than yours.
Yeah, I think this whole case comes down to judging a lot of actions versus the heart of things. I think we can look at these things and say, well, this church just wants to put on a show. This church just wants it to be like a concert because they have great musicians and they put a bunch of money or whatever or effort into making it look nice. And so their heart must be in the wrong place. Right. When in reality, we're judging just what we see on the surface, and we have no clue what the heart says, to be honest.
And so, again, if you don't want lights, guitars, or fog machines, that's fine. But to judge somebody or another one else without knowing them, without understanding their motivations, that is an enemy of worship, not a guitar.
Yeah.
And so use your conscience. It's okay to have your conscience, but let's not call people out and speak down on people who do things that we think is not as spiritual. And that could go both ways. I mean, someone who does lights, guitars, and fog machines can look down negatively on another church that doesn't, thinking that they don't care about reaching people.
Yeah, good
it's
point.
Well, no, if that's their conviction, let's just be nice to each other.
Yeah, right.
And with this, here's number 5, which you said, which I think is a big part of this, especially when it comes to conscience and what we prefer, that your background determines your preferences. So a lot of times we bash things that we don't like, but it's because we don't have a background in it. In my experience, I can't think of a single example where someone who doesn't like just the guitar or just the whatever and all of these light shows if they grew up in a church that was traditional. Maybe they just had a piano, they had hymns and a choir. It's ironic that the more spiritual thing to do is what they grew up with, is what their background is. Right. That's always the case.
Yeah.
And so just when you look at another form of worship and you say, I don't like it, I would just be curious to see if there's anybody who did not grow up with a particular background, especially more when it comes to this, a more traditional background. Like I don't think most people who met Jesus at a church that did a full band then all of a sudden says, you know what, I think full bands are bad.
Right.
And we should just have a acoustic guitar.
And there's nothing wrong with the fact that your background determines your preferences. I think we just have to be honest about it. I mean, my background totally does. I can look growing up in church and to where we are now, and I have a total preference. And that's fine. But we just have to be honest with it and not pretend like there's a more spiritual reason behind it versus this is what I'm comfortable with.
Again, so our background can be the enemy if we let it. Like for me, I grew up in a very contemporary church with lights, guitars, and I think they had fog machines at some point. And so to me, I'm fine with it because I knew the heart, it impacted me, and it was not to put on a show. It was no, there was a reason they wanted to help people connect. And so just the question is, if you have a problem with the way a church is doing it, is it a problem with they're doing it, or is it just different preference based on your background? And so your background can be the enemy if you're not careful. And then here's number 5, that creativity is an expression of worship. So some people that aren't just as intrinsically creative may prefer not to have more creative elements in a worship service. Whereas for other people, like to be creative as a kind of a way of worshiping God and excited that their creativity helps other people focus. So way a set design looks, or certain lights, or how the sound is mixed. If you're creative in that way, then you enjoy creating atmospheres, environments that people can connect to without distractions.
Yeah, I think sometimes we kind of, I don't know what the right way to put this is, but kind of almost put different people's different levels of serving or different levels or different forms of worship above others, where if someone comes in and they're super hospitable, then they're a great fit for the church. They're a great face of the church. But if someone comes in and they've got a great background in production, or they really enjoy doing, like you said, set design or setting lights and doing these things that honestly not everybody can do, that does take a certain mind, then I think we can have the tendency to kind of be like, well, they're just trying to put on a show.
Right.
You know, they're using their talents and their God-given skills to do one thing, and someone else is doing the exact same thing in a different area, but we kind of look at them totally different, when I don't see any reason that should happen.
No, that's a great point, because again, it's easy for us to judge and look down on people who have different strengths than we do.
Yeah.
Just like it's easy for us to judge and look down on people whose sin struggle is different than ours.
Yeah, of
Because
course.
it's like, well, that's not how we do it, and that's not our problem. I can't believe that they're doing it. So creativity is not the enemy. In fact, creativity is given us to by God. So
Yeah.
all this to say, we're not saying one or the other is better.
Right.
We're just saying the assumption that more production stuff is bad is assuming that you only want spiritually mature people in your church, and I don't think that's the case.
Yes.
So let's not knock people who want, and in some cases need, extra help in helping them focus and grow closer to God.
Yep.
So again, here are 5 reasons why lights, guitars, and fog machines aren't the enemy in ministry. 1, you don't want a church full of only mature believers. 2, leading people into worship is a good thing. 3, use your conscience, because we need different churches of different styles to reach different people. 4, your background does determine your preferences.
Yep.
It's not just what you think is spiritual. And 5, creativity is an expression of worship. So hey, if you have more questions about this, or if you're like, we completely disagree with you, let us know. practicalplanning.com/questions. You can submit it. We'll talk about it in the future episode. And until next time, we'll be with you on Practical Church Planning. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Practical Church Planning. Whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or Practical Planning, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, make sure you like or subscribe or do whatever it's telling you to do or should do on that platform.
And hey, if you are so tired of looking at our ugly faces, but you're not tired of listening to our beautiful voices, then you can find our podcast if you just search Practical Church Planning on iTunes or Google Play. Make sure not to just find it, not just to listen, but to subscribe.
Make sure you subscribe. Brian, tell them to subscribe.
Subscribe.
See you next time.